So, what's up?
Oh, I'm gonna have to turn off the.
Is this off?
Let's see.
Ah, yes. Should I turn this off? Good. Do you want this? Take this.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nelson. It's really good to be back, and I do really hope that the sky clears up because my main reason for being here is to use that giant telescope. There really isn't a lot of places like this, and we're super fortunate to be here and to have access to that for free. So, I am from Metuchen. I'm from New Jersey. Right now, I actually live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, up near Boston. I live across the street from MIT, but I did not go there. A lot of people think that I do. But I actually trained to be an aerospace engineer at Rutgers University, also in New Jersey. And right now I work as something called a integration and test engineer or systems engineer, which just means that I turn things on, turn things off, turn things on, turn things off, and make sure that they can do that a lot of times, that they work really well. And I'll tell you a lot more about the details of what I do. So yeah, please interrupt me with a lot of questions. I really want to get to know all the people here since I only know 5 of you or 6. So every slide, I'll share a little bit about what I do, but there's a lot of pictures and topics there. So what you guys want to know, I want to share what you guys want to hear. So the first question people normally ask me is, why do you like space and what got you into space? So when I was about 11 years old, I was at Walgreens with my aunt, and she buys me whatever I want because I'm a kid. But instead of candy that day, I kind of wanted a magazine that looked like this one. And it totally just captured my imagination. I read that book every night. And then over the next few years, I just read more of those magazines, more of those documentaries, science fiction movies, mockumentaries like Ancient Aliens. And, that was my main hobby. I knew that I could be a scientist because my mom's a biological researcher and so is my dad. So that was always a career path that I could see for myself. And I would always tell people, I want to be an astrophysicist. I'm 11 years old. People thought that was weird. Oops. People thought that was weird. But I didn't really care because I was super curious. And I considered space to be a natural progression from exploring mountains, forests, oceans to space. So, yeah, anything? No? Okay. So the biggest next step for me from becoming from a kid who was just passionate about things to, actually starting on that path of a career was going to school, doing well in science class. So this is where, some things that aren't so obvious come into play. One huge thing for me succeeding in school was being included. And so I joined the high school astronomy club when it was first starting out. And I was super included, super, encouraged and mentored really well with Mr. Nelson and the older students there. I was the youngest. I was the only girl. That didn't really matter. My confidence was unmatched. And, everyone kind of liked to do this with me and explore space with me. I also got mentorship from an alumni. So in our Metuchen High School Hall of Fame, across from my locker was a picture of a NASA scientist. And I reached out to her. She didn't answer me for a really long time. And I bugged her again, and turns out she was really busy because they had a new telescope at NASA, and she was working on it. But she was super nice and invited me to come down. And that was my first time at NASA. If you've never been to NASA, I highly recommend going and trying to find someone to give you a tour because all those NASA scientists and engineers are super friendly. And they love to do what we do here in outreach. So she gave me a tour while I was down there looking at colleges, and I wanted to know what was it like to be an astronomer or an astrophysicist like her. What was the day-to-day life like? And to my horror, I hated it. I did not want to be an astronomer after that visit. That very day, I was this is not what I want to do. And not because the work is not cool, but more so because the place wasn't cool. The offices for an astronomer are, a normal office, a computer, a desk. They have their own office, work on their own thing. And in my mind, I was thinking a Tony Stark looking room where he's building that ship to go to space, or there's a talking raccoon or something. But that's not what it was. And I realized just how far away the stars were from that space. But then she brought me to some big room that I'd never seen before. And I have a picture of it here beneath the picture of the start parties Mr. Nelson was talking about. And this is called a high bay. And it's called that because it's a really high ceiling. It's about 5 to even 10 stories tall, a single room. And it's meant to hold spacecraft. And that's where you work on spacecraft. That's where you build it. It's where you test it. And it's very, very clean. You can tell it's like white. People are wearing smocks in there. And at the time, that's when they were working on the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the most powerful one to ever be built. And she told me so. And she brought me to the dirty, clean room before it, since I couldn't go in that one. And I kind of wanted to know, like, what I have to do to get in this room, you know? And she told me, oh, an aerospace engineer works here. And that's all those people there. And I was like, I don't know what that word means, but I'm signing up. It only took 4 years to become an aerospace engineer. It only took me 2 to get into that kind of room from when I was in high school. So it definitely was the most exciting path. And it looked, you know, like a Star Wars movie, honestly, to have that spacecraft there. That's what I wanted to do. That takes a lot of, you know, knowledge, though. You know, those people who handle very expensive flight hardware know a lot about the math, know a lot about the physics. And part of being included, part of being mentored was having really great teachers. So I went to a public school, and I always hated math. But I got really, really lucky in high school to finally get some great math teachers who made my brain work. And I was no longer impeded by that mathematical tension and scariness. So I was very ready to go to college and keep doing this sort of engineering path. Yeah, that's school. So I don't know if you guys ever heard this. This is my personal mantra, and this is what I told myself, like, every day that I was working toward that goal now of becoming an aerospace engineer or working in space and exploring space. And I just told myself, you know, no matter how tired I got or how difficult it got, the only thing more painful than doing this once is doing it twice, you know? So I got to do it right the first time. Here you go. But yeah, so if there was a class that I didn't like or that had really hard homework, you know, there's ChatGPT right there. There's Chegg, you know, there's someone who could just tell you the answer. But it's going to be so much more painful if, like, I failed this class because I didn't do the homework and I don't know the exam, and then I have to do this again and, like, retake that class, and that would suck, and that'd be double as painful. So I just kind of forced myself to do it correctly the first time. Or even as an engineer, I think you guys all know, engineers are supposed to, you know, qualify different things like planes, and if they think that the list is really long and hard and they don't do it right the first time, that plane door is going to pop off mid-flight, and then it's going to suck when they do it again after all the media was like, what the hell, like, what's up with that plane? So, and yeah, for me at work, if I don't do a test correctly the first time and thoroughly, like, people are going to ask me why, they're going to make me do it again, and they're going to question all of my decisions. So I always have to keep this in mind. So I also had this in mind when I was choosing a college, and I researched it very thoroughly. And I have a lot of opinions about higher education and the space industry as a whole right now, and what paths are going to get you where. But, you know, feel free to ask me about that if you have questions on this slide, since a lot of you guys seem to be around high school, college age. So yeah, as an engineer, as a scientist-minded person, these are the types of schools that I looked into. But disclaimer, like, a lot of people I work with, or even in the space industry that you see, are not scientists or engineers at all. They do a lot of different things. So, you know, I chose ultimately to go to a large university, Rutgers University, and that was because it had both my major and any backup majors if I hated that one, and I wouldn't have to transfer schools, and it was also the most affordable one for me, being down the street, being in state. And yeah, that was really important to me because, you know, financial freedom is very closely tied to academic performance, and the time that I would have spent, you know, in a minimum wage job, I could spend instead getting opportunities, going on trips with my school, doing really cool projects in the lab that, you know, aren't necessarily paid. So yeah, I was very grateful to get scholarships from these organizations that you see the logos of here. These are all engineering organizations that I was part of on campus. And they enabled me to achieve a lot of things that I'm going to talk about, because it takes time, and time is money. So in that picture there, I'm in the middle, and I'm next to a Boeing engineer, and we're at Cape Canaveral, and that's a space shuttle Atlantis behind us. It's retired. That's why it's open. And that was at the Society of Hispanic Engineers Conference. I went there on a scholarship grant from my school, and we got to meet basically anyone and everyone who had any type of dream job. So it wasn't like part of class, but I got to meet that engineer, launch engineers, astronaut engineers, like people who work with astronauts and like strap them in and stuff on the launch pad. And I actually even got to see a launch, and I got to get an internship. So that was like a really formative experience, and something not a lot of students focus on when they're in school is going to these conferences, but it's a really good idea. Being at that conference also, oh yeah, what was that?
What was your major at Rutgers? Or are you going to get into that?
I'm going to get into like the specifics there, yeah, about like why I chose it and the classes I took and stuff. But it was aerospace engineering. Yeah, so part of my major being space, I joined clubs on campus that were kind of going to give me some like experience and that let me do some fun things that I would want to do anyway. So I joined the Space Technology Association at Rutgers, and we built robots, weather balloons, which go really high up in the air and record the atmosphere at that altitude and come back down, and we chase them. And we also built a cube satellite, and I have so much to say on that because that was basically my brainchild, along with a lot of other people. That was my first spacecraft. And then I was also the co-chair for the engineering and computer science career fair at Rutgers, which was awesome because, you know, if you can't travel to a big conference, you can definitely help your school make one at home. And that's also a really good professional opportunity for me that I enjoyed doing. So, yeah.
Can you talk more about the cube thing that you said you worked on?
Yeah, so the CubeSat. That's like the design of the CubeSat. And it was basically an experiment that I did for one of my professors. And I did it from like the design phase all the way to making a vomit comet experiment for it. So I'll definitely show you more pictures about that. But that was a super important part of my undergrad experience, and it helped me get my job and everything. Like, it's a real satellite. So, you know, being an engineering student, you build things like the satellite. This is like a picture of what my computer looked like all the time with like a computer aided model there, CAD model. And it lists all the different parts of the cube satellite. You know, we have like a payload, which is on one half, known as the fuel tank. And then we have a bunch of sensors to study what that fuel tank's doing. And one of those is even a camera that I helped to code. A lot of errors. That's what engineering is. You have all this hardware, you have designs and ideas, and you're trying to make it all work together. And it probably won't for a long time, but then it will. And that's really cool. And so, yeah. That's the difference between my major, aerospace engineering, which is like building something for space or for flight, and astrophysics or astronomy. This is what my astrophysics homework looked like, because it was my minor to do astrophysics classes. And this is astrophysics. This is not astronomy. Astronomy is all about data collection, observing the stars, observing celestial objects, making new ways to get that data, like new telescopes like the James Webb, or new sensors or cameras. But astrophysics takes all that data that the astronomers collected, usually working at observatories and control centers, and they work in their own offices to, you know, pull some Einstein math and see, oh, like, does this work? And like, is this what we're seeing here? And if it does work with their computer simulations, like this is of a galaxy merger, then we know we understand and we know what's going on, or we don't and we discover something new. So I did an astronomy minor, and I took astrophysics classes as well. So I worked with both observed data sets and the models. But my major, aerospace engineering, was all about the CubeSat. It was all about hardware, nuts and bolts, bending a beam, simulating that bent beam, calculating if that beam's gonna break, things like that, which are important for structures that we build on Earth or in space that fly. A lot of planes, too, a lot of plane studies that I did. And that was important for me to do aerospace engineering and not astrophysics as my major, because one, I knew the room I wanted to be in required me to be an engineer to work on hardware. But two, like, Rutgers has majors that are accredited, which means that like a job will want you to have that training, like to a standard. So my major was accredited. I went to a school that had that as an accredited major. My minor was not accredited, like as a minor, but as a major, I think it might be. The astrophysics program at Rutgers is really good. And I do want to shout out Dr. Kristen McQuinn. She's my astrophysics professor, and she now works on the Dark Matter Telescope at NASA. She's like the head of it. So it's pretty cool that she gets to lead that. The Roman telescope is launching in 2027. And even my CubeSat students now are working on testing that, like in the chambers and stuff. So both astrophysics and astronomers work it. Yeah.
Did you ever work with anything like to do with astrobiology?
Great question. I have not worked on astrobiology. It is a goal of mine to actually do astrobiology because I think it's really cool. Astrobiology is the study of like biology in zero gravity, and that can mean like humans, which are biological organisms in zero gravity. I'm just saying, or little like medical devices and things like that, or cells, or liquids in space. But I do want to do that, but I personally haven't. Yeah, no, it's really cool. So more about the CubeSat. It could be applied to astrobiology, which is why I hope I can make that jump. Because it's all about fuel, and fuel is liquid, right? Propellant, and when you're in microgravity, right? Like that fuel is not going to do what you want it to do. Imagine like picking up like a plate of water and trying to like move and not spill it. It's going to go everywhere, and that's with gravity helping you at least stay down in the plate. But in microgravity, when those Falcon 9s launch and come back, they still have fuel in them, they start moving in really unpredictable ways, and they start hitting the sides of the launch vehicle and start tipping it over, and it becomes like a broom in your hand that just wants to spill, like topple over. And the current solution now is to just have less fuel, or just be really ham-handed with the way you control those vehicles. You can't do certain maneuvers that you want to do. But my satellite was designed with my professor, who was an expert in control theory, which is an engineering discipline. And he was thinking that we can teach a satellite to do what a human does when they hold something unsteady and tell if it's about to tip over one way and correct for it. So I started off building like a 1 degree of freedom test bench, which just means it spun in this way. And by the time I graduated, we had designed a satellite like that was going to test all different degrees of freedom, right, and tumble in any which way in zero gravity, because still we have not any data from zero gravity on sloshing. MIT tried, their sensors failed and things like that, where we still don't have this data, and it could really help our space missions. And I made this thing, let's see if that works. This thing here, which is a 3 degree of freedom test bench. And in the center is supposed to be like a dummy satellite that we can just plug in and replace with our real satellite, and put all of this on a vomit comet. And a vomit comet is a type of experiment that a lot of astrobiologists go on because it simulates zero gravity. So it like jumps up and jumps down. And, that was my capstone, was to say that I started this research, as a freshman and studied the sloshing on the ground, modeling it, did a CubeSat to see how we can go to space. And now I built like a way that we can bring it to semi-space, and it can tumble in 3 degrees of freedom that way. So the SpaceX competition, satellite stuff you asked. Super important program. It is run by the Air Force Research Laboratory. It's 10 universities for 2 years that get a set amount of money, and they are told, go build the satellite, and whoever does the best job will win a flight, like a launch, and we'll pay for it as the Air Force. So we designed the SpaceSat in that amount of time. We did a whole lot of analysis, and they grilled us, and it was like generals, and it was really intimidating, but it was really helpful because I got to do things like communication simulations, learning how to use radio. I got to do something called systems engineering, which is how a space mission is conceived, and then how you can plan for a human being to make it happen, and think of all the different constraints that you have with the hardware. And then I also became the program manager, which meant that I was the face of the satellite, and I was advocating for it on the funding side. I was responsible for building our first integration facility for spaceflight hardware in Rutgers University. So getting a lab, literally like an empty room, and installing everything to make it safe to build something like a satellite. The satellite is a nanosat, which means it's about this big. And a normal satellite, as I'll show you later, I've worked on, could be as large as like a truck. And the benefit of a small satellite is it's cheaper. A student can use it and not like get crushed by it if they did something wrong. And you can make a lot of them really quickly. So all the Starlinks are nanosats typically, or flatter. They're smaller. They're not nano, but it's a huge benefit. It's a new technology. Yeah, so this is a lot of work, a lot of time. Did it all with some research grants. And yeah, does anyone have any questions on like the experiment, anything to do with the CubeSat? This is like the CubeSat slide before I talk about like the other stuff I've done. Yeah.
How did you actually test the CubeSat? Did you put in a chamber, the vibration chamber, and do that shake thing to see if it falls apart?
So we needed to borrow someone's shaker table. And by the time I graduated, we still haven't found someone to like let us borrow it. But that it would be a huge and important step. And if we made it to phase 2, which we didn't, but we're trying again, the Air Force has their own shaker tables, so they would let us put our satellite on. Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious regarding the fuel cell. I mean, I'm sure you've thought of it as there's reasons why against like using a syringe fuel versus like something that utilizes centrifugal force, so the fuel would always end up in the same place.
Well, I think those are both good ideas. With the centrifugal force, anything with moving parts is probably going to break in space. So I think like it's almost like we could try it, but it might be like a extra risk we don't want to take. Like it's more risky than just having it slosh around and, you know, dealing with it. And the syringes are also a good idea. I think they might be constrained. What comes to mind for me is they're really small orifices, like holes. So if you need a lot of fuel to your engines really quickly, that might be like tough to do in like a bunch of small capillary tubes. But that is research that Rutgers does look into with capillaries.
So the solution was more of balancing?
Yes, it was teaching the reaction wheels, which are literal discs that spin on 3 sides of the satellite. And based on their spin, they impart different physical forces on the satellite to like push it one way or push it another way. Since there's nothing to push against in space, it just has its own momentum, like holding a spinning bicycle wheel in a chair that'll like move you. So yeah, we were basically like recording what the slosh was doing with a camera, and then also with pressure sensors, and then feed it to like an algorithm that would say like, okay, when you do this maneuver, the slosh likes to go that way. Do it again, but predict what you need to do for when it hit. So it, you know it's going to hit that wall. So like do a little, extra this way. Yeah, compensate. So like, you're about to hit that wall. Take care of it in advance until it can become stable. Yeah.
So do solid fuel rockets not have a sloshing problem then? Is that kind of the... I assume they have their own set of problems, but...
Yeah, they don't have that problem since the fuel is solid.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that some of the testing was on the bomb atomic.
Yeah, so what was your question about that?
Well, I was just curious about how that whole arrangement is made.
Yeah.
You weren't on it, were you?
No, so I was told that if I built this, I could try and get a ticket and go on this Vomit Comet, but Vomit Comets cost a lot of money, and without that money, we couldn't get a seat or a seat for our experiment. So we have not flown it yet, but it passes the requirements for zero gravity flight. So this experiment is like physically ready for that flight, but we need money to send a bunch of students up there with this.
So who takes the project and brings it to the...
Typically the researchers, so that could be students, that could be the professor, and then there's a company called Zero G, and they have a plane that goes out of some airports and will take you up into like a parabolic maneuver, and they're like specially trained pilots that do that. Yeah.
What kind of onboard computers are you using for the CubeSats?
Yeah, so for the CubeSats, we had a lot of research to do to find a computer that was able to do that sort of powerful processing. What we ultimately decided was to get a less powerful computer. I forgot what it was called. It was called like a it had like it was like a brand name for like satellite computers though. Like they sell these because they make a lot of satellites for different schools and companies. We just bought one of those, and our solution was just, make it do the basics, but let it send through the antenna all the data to the ground. We'll use bigger computers on the ground, compute, what the algorithm needs to do. Tell it next time, next orbit, try again with what we computed. So the computer itself was split between like a dummy computer that took care of everything but the algorithm, and an experiment computer that would like receive that information from the ground.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I only had one class on it, so my basic understanding is it has like 2 chemical like powders almost, and kind of like a firecracker, you like light it, and that'll be your explosive force to push and provide that lift off the ground. But we use liquid ones because I think it's preferred, because I think it's like more efficient or easier to handle. And you can like actually, when you have like liquid, you can change your direction easier, and a solid one is just kind of like light it and let it go. That's kind of your one shot versus like do one burst and another burst and one stage and a second stage. Yeah. So those are actually used more for missiles. Those are solid stage rockets or missiles, or like the ones you can make that just shoot up for like a model rocket, because you only got one destination. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Oh yeah, we won first place. Just wanted to say that we won first place, Best Aerospace Engineering Award, and I'll tell you why. It's not because it was the best project like by technical like achievement. It wasn't the most advanced technologically. Like there wasn't something crazy new that we discovered here. But I knew from the Air Force competition that we kind of lost, but we can re-enter. It was about what was the coolest to look at and what they understood the best. So the judges understood this the best because we could turn it on for them. We can show the clear glass case, the experiment happening inside, the fluid moving inside, the live data being wirelessly transmitted. And that's why we won first place. So yeah. And the second thing I want to mention here is I published a paper on student satellite management methods. So if you ever want to know for yourself how to build a satellite, I have a paper on it and you can read it online. So my first internship was in between my sophomore and junior year of college. I moved out to Redondo Beach, California, right outside Los Angeles. It was such a fun summer because I was a systems engineering intern. And like I said before, systems engineering is all about like planning what this mission's gonna do. And I helped out with the launch and early orbit test sequence, which is that critical phase when you launch something and release it into orbit. You have to do all these checkouts, and there's a lot of timeline constraints that you have to plan for. Like if you want to do, a antenna deployment, but you also want to calibrate your reaction wheels, you may or may not be able to do that at the same time, depending on the satellite. So that's what I was helping out with and writing up documents for that whole summer. I was also really lucky that I happened to be at the site where James Webb was built, and all of my coworkers were James Webb engineers, and they had launched it the December before I arrived. So that summer we got that first look picture that you see there. And I knew all the people who made that happen, and I saw their labs, where they made it happen. Wow. And I knew the launch engineers, and I could just talk to them all the time, and they were so stoked to tell me about what it was like to launch Webb, how they folded it, how they tested it for 20 years. It was a great moment, and it was a great place to be that summer. And here's an example of the top two of what systems engineering is, what a timeline is, what a satellite does when it's in orbit between launch and then like unfolding solar panels, finding its ground station, giving information to the ground and the people on the ground, and starting to test out all of its subsystems. And that's kind of what I did. And I was able to do it because I already knew it from the CubeSat. So that was my first summer. Thought it was really awesome. I love learning about this stuff, but I realized that I didn't know what antenna was. I'd never seen one before. They're expensive, and so I'd never been able to have one of my own from eBay or something. So I realized that to be a good systems engineer and to be able to like make these big decisions in missions and plan out a whole mission, you had to know what each piece of hardware did by using it. And the people who use it are called integration and test engineers. And so this was my following summer. That was my office. And I would, go to the factory, which was a Boeing factory, Boeing Satellite Systems in El Segundo, California, the largest satellite factory in the world. It is like 2 miles long of high bay, about 5 stories tall, and it's a factory. So it produces satellites. It's been doing satellites for decades. Probably many of the satellites your phones use rely on these satellites produced in this factory. So being an integration test engineer meant that I had to walk the factory floor every day. I would go to this test station where they had this like car-sized satellite open for me to like check all the hardware pieces, probe it, check that its like radio frequencies were going through, turn on its reaction wheels, turn on its thrusters, and run these scripted tests and record everything for the systems engineers to analyze. I would wear like a smock and like a head cover and like gloves and a wrist strap to prevent any electrical damage. And what else I do? Booties sometimes to just prevent any dirt from getting onto the satellite, because any contamination would just float in space and then like hit the satellite. So it was a pretty cool job, and I got to do some of those tests that you asked about, like the shaker tables. Since it's Boeing, they're really rich and they have all those. So we had a 3-story tall vacuum chamber, which is like a giant oven, and they would slide like 2 satellites at a time because they were that big. And I would, bless you, I would inspect it. I would check that like nothing was leaking out of the sides. You could walk in if you wanted. It was kind of scary though. It was like a black hole. And they would just close it for 2 weeks and let it cook and check with like their signals if like, oh, did it burn, or like is it frozen, or things like that. Because that's what happens in space. It's either cooked by the sun or frozen because of the Earth's shadow. And then they also had vibration tables where they place it on the tables and shake it and see if it would like break or shatter. They also have shock tables where they pretend to like drop it, because that might happen when it's being launched. And had an acoustic chamber too, which was like a 4-story tall room that was just all speakers, and they would blast it with sounds that it might hear in the launch at those large decibels and see if it would break under that stress too. So yeah, I also got the chance to meet other engineers like astrodynamicists, which similar to an astronomer or an astrophysicist, studies the motion of celestial objects, but they plan trajectories. And then I also supported some Top Gun test pilot tests that were in Mojave Desert. Good thing I went there, because I thought it was cool, but it sucks to be in the desert. I could never, ever live there. I wanted to die. It was so hot. But those pilots are awesome, and it was a really cool experience to meet those flight test engineers. And I learned a lot about what it's like to have a human in the loop, which is what astronauts do. It's very different than having just your satellite up there. And last but not least, that summer I got the chance to go to NASA again, this time at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory up by Caltech. Fantastic opportunity. I was offered a job there actually, but I had to turn it down because I was already working at Boeing. But yeah, it's my dream job still. It's a fantastic place. I got to see the Europa Clipper in the high bay. And right now it's in space trying to go to Europa, the moon. But it was amazing to just meet the engineers there and actually understand what they do. And they understood that I could help do it. So any other questions you have about this cool summer experience, or like things that I did, feel free to ask.
What do you mean by calibrate simulators?
Calibrate what?
Calibrate simulators.
Calibrate simulators. Okay. So when a satellite is sitting in that room, it's not getting any sunlight. But in space, it's going to have solar panels that receive sunlight. So you have to make like a machine that will trick the satellite into thinking it's receiving sunlight into its solar panels, just to check the solar panels actually work. And those are simulators. They simulate what it's going to happen in space.
Sarah, how did you connect with Boeing and the other companies? How did you
Yeah, so through those conferences and scholarships, I met people who worked there, and a lot of recruiters go to those either the scholarship boards or the conferences, and they ask for students to apply. And that's what I did.
Good.
Yeah. How did you go about finding a mentorship with JPL while in college? So what happened was I actually just applied to JPL, and then I interviewed, and she's like, please work for me. And I was like, I'm poor, I need money, and then this one offers me 4 times more money. And I accepted it because I needed the money. But she was like, at NASA people are so nice. So I just kept talking to her, and she was like, please reach out. So I did, and she, still answered my questions and showed me around NASA. Yeah, so just reaching out.
What's an aeronautical test flight?
So aeronautics means planes, or planes that will fly over sea or land, as opposed to astronautics, which means space, so like above the plane level. And an aeronautical test activity or test flight just means like a Top Gun flight, like fighter jets and basically like test flights that go in, not to space, just to the normal air regime. Yeah. Yeah? Okay. So that brings me to where I am today. The NASA JPL mentor, she used to work at this other laboratory that I'd never heard of before called Draper. And it's across the street from MIT. It used to be a part of MIT before it became its own company. It's a nonprofit. And it's a research and development lab. And I am an integration and test engineer there, similarly to how I was in my last internship before graduating college. We are primarily known for our guidance, navigation, and control, GNC solutions, which means, how do you guide, navigate, and control vehicles in space. So they did that for Apollo. That's a picture of people from Apollo doing math, doing hand calculations, like hidden figures. And today, I still do help with our guidance and navigation solutions, specifically testing the devices that we use to understand if you're moving forward or backward or left or right or up or down. So I do have a question to ask you guys, and I'll ask like a vote. Can anyone tell me like who they think the smartest person in this picture is? So like take a good look and see what you can see, if you recognize who those people are. This picture from Draper back in the day. So if you think this guy is the smartest, please raise your hand. No, he looks dumb. Poor guy. If you think this lady is the smartest, raise your hand. Okay, got some people. What about this lady? She's got like a sassy look. You think she's smart? Okay, what about this guy? Does he look smart? What about this guy? He's like busy working. Maybe he's smart. Or this guy, I don't know if that's a person. Maybe it's like just a ball. Okay, so I don't know what you guys thought when I asked that question, but I do want to challenge it. And I say that the smartest person in this room is the one who did not give up. And that is something I've discovered just being in school and being in these spaces. A lot of people will make assumptions about who the smartest person is and who knows what's going on. But really, the person that sticks with the problem the longest is who people will realize is the smartest. Even in school, who the smart kid was just the one who let themselves think the longest and not give up. And most of us probably just gave up and waited for the smart guy to tell us. But in real life, I've been right in times when people did not think I was the smartest because I was young or other reasons. But it's because I really stuck with the problem and I wanted to know what the problem meant and what the solution meant. So that's a kind of self-confidence or like science reality, is people have all these ideas about who's smartest, but it's really the person who doesn't give up. When I'm trying to be smart and do things, I'm usually handling hardware. It's literally so hands-on. I hurt my back. I'm lifting hardware and I'm putting it on shaker tables or putting it in the centrifuge. Centrifuge, if you don't know, is something that makes an object experience g-forces by spinning it really fast at the end of a long lever arm. Other things that I encounter include shaker tables, vibration tables, shock tables, rate tables, which just spin in place. They don't spin out like a centrifuge does. Also vacuum chambers, which pretend to be space by sucking out all the air of that chamber, or a thermal vacuum chamber, which also adds some heat and cooling elements. I both built and operated those. I use a lot of software tools. I use MATLAB, Python, and other tools, as well as a lot of electrical engineering tools like oscilloscopes and probes, and building electronics myself. And I also, do a lot of teamwork, meet a lot of different people, always have to ask them questions. And last but not least, being next to MIT has its perks. We get to talk to them a lot. We get to go to workshops hosted by them a lot and meet a lot of other really smart people from other universities that are not just across the street, like Harvard or Northeastern or Boston University. Oh yeah, and this is the entrance. Any questions? Or like anything?
Yes, where do you think, where do you aim aviation, astrobiology, you mentioned that. Do you have this sense of in what direction you might be moving?
Yeah, so like future, that's my present.
Of course.
Present, it's a lot of, micro electromechanical work, which means like electronics that are really small, which our sensors are. But long term and like short term, I really want to move towards like astrobiology, human space systems. I think that we're obviously seeing a rise in space tourism. That also means a rise in access to space for more science. Like the ISS is like so popular. I think everyone loves ISS, and it's gonna die. It's gonna like go and burn up in the atmosphere in 2030, and something else is going to have to go up in its place because it's really popular, it's really useful, and people like to go up there. So I want to start, helping develop these capabilities for biology and people in space to not just go there and do work, but to thrive. So these come in a lot of different ways, but how I can explain it is there's like the suit and the sensors and the capabilities in them, but there's also like smaller missions that don't go all the way to space, but are like space planes that can do like those parabolas. And there's analog simulations that explore the psychological and systems parts on Earth, like on a volcano or undersea. And there's also a lot of wearable technology that needs to be perfected, not just for the astronauts, but anything you make easier for an astronaut is automatically a lot easier on Earth and could help our biomedical research here. That's a huge passion of mine. Too much biology. But Cambridge is also a hub for a lot of biotech. So that's kind of the direction I personally want to go in.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I just want to point out here, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this picture on the top or bottom. Does anyone know who these are, or if I can explain? So you guys all know Buzz Aldrin, like cool guy, whatever. But these ladies are what's up right now. So Anna Menon and Sarah Gillis are two of the top engineers at SpaceX, and they are also the two women in all of history who've gone the closest to the moon. They helped lead the effort to design these spacesuits, and as badass as it sounds, put themselves in the vacuum of space. Sarah put herself in the vacuum of space with that suit. So she really trusted her team, and she lived, and so did the billionaire who funded them. So yeah, all smiles, and they're my role models because they do bioastronautics, and they led that mission, the Polaris Dawn mission. That was just this year, 2024, September 10th. And Kelly Girardi on the bottom, she is here doing a microgravity experiment for fluid motion, like sloshing. And she was on the Virgin Galactic 5 mission. And I just want to point out that unlike these two women up here, she's not an engineer. She's actually a publicist and a filmer, a blogger, an influencer. But she gets to run these experiments, and she's the head human research scientist for this IIAS organization because she's excellent at communicating these scientific missions, and she's trained really hard to be able to perform under these conditions. So you really don't have to be an engineer or a fighter pilot or like the typical astronaut anymore to go on these flights and to participate in this research. She's also wearing a lot of wearable technology, as you can see, like the goggles, the wrist straps, and things like that. Oh, and you can't see it here, but they also wore like technical contacts. So there's a lot of cool tech happening with that. Another path I've considered, but I'm not as like keen on because I just think bio is really cool right now, is astrodynamics, which I've mentioned. And it's a really cool path for those who are interested in astronomy or astrophysics to take because someone's got to plan the trajectories. If you saw The Martian, that was an astrodynamicist guy there. And I don't know if you watched Interstellar, but like Dr. Brand here is stressing over the math. It's really hard math, but if you love math, if you love the stars, you want to study how that all works, be an astrodynamicist. There's a lot of conferences you can go to learn about it. And it's all about how you navigate the solar system. Yeah, any questions about this slide? Yeah.
Perhaps there's some people here that are thinking of a career in that direction. Not specific to you, but what are the financial opportunities of someone that does go that direction?
Tasha Dynamics?
Just your world in general.
Like, how much do they pay?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that I'm paid very well, but I am also someone who negotiates, and my line of work has applications that are regularly and consistently funded. So depending on what organization you're a part of, like NASA, that funding goes in and out, you know? It changes a lot. It's the government. It might not always be the best paid. But if you're in like Lockheed Martin, you know, you're probably going to get a lot of really great opportunities and financial stability because that company has multiple interests that are evenly funded.
Sarah, we mentioned a few times, you had mentioned the vomit comet, but I would bet half the people don't know why it's called that.
Oh, well, you know, like you ever get like sick from like a car, you want to throw up, or motion sickness from a boat. This, you know, plane is going like this a bunch of times, and the reason that they do that is so you can have 0 G at like one point, but then you get hyper G in the bottom up to like 10 or something. I don't know, but not 10, but they make you test for up to 18, I know, because that's what my instructor had to stand. But yeah, so going back and forth, your inner ear is going to get really stressed out because your eyes are going to see the room as still, right? Like that, it's relativity. So you're going to see the room as still, and not relativity. It's Newtonian, but like basically your eyes are going to see the room as still, and your body's going to feel not still, and your ears going to like be like, we're not still, and your eyes are like, yes, we are, and so it's going to make you want to throw up, and that's why it's called the vomit comet. But interestingly, deaf people don't experience this, and that's an area of research where deaf astronauts are trying to happen. Yes?
What if you just close your eyes?
No. You can still like kind of like feel, like your body still knows that like it looks and feels still, even though it doesn't feel still. To be fair, I haven't looked at the studies that have used blind astronauts, so I feel like we have to check a blind astronaut, a deaf astronaut, and like a fully capable astronaut and see who gets sick first. Yeah. But this is a great case. Things that were disabilities on Earth could actually be capabilities in space. And so we have to start thinking like people who have prosthetics. That could actually be a huge advantage in space. And that's also a huge push for bio because, you know, yeah, having an extra leg or arm in space could be really cool and helpful when you grab onto things. Yeah. Or not getting sick. Having deaf astronauts would be great for that. Or using ASL, because if you're in a suit, you can't tell what they're saying with their lips, so you have to use ASL in the suit. Yeah. These are my notes from college.
Oh, is that your paperwork?
This is mine, yeah. This is literally my notebook from like astrodynamics class. So this is celestial mechanics for real. This is like for an exam. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Second to last slide, but ultimately I want to work in mission control. It's always been my dream. I think I would be really awesome there, not just because I know how hardware works and how the system works as a whole, and I like to talk to people and integrate with different teams, but I also have really good judgment in emergencies, and I think that would be a wonderful asset in mission control. I also think mission control is awesome. And yeah, there's different things that they do. They do launch, they do orbit, they do communications with astronauts, and they also do anomaly resolution, which you can only do if you've seen it break on the ground, because once it's in space, all you have is the data stream, so you have to have intuition from that. And yeah, this might require some advanced studies. And I just want to plug, like, there's conferences that I think are public where you can just attend, either virtually or in person, where NASA talks about human research and teaming people in mission control and in space. So yeah, there's just a picture of like one mission control woman, and I'm like, that could be me. And this is the Very Large Array Telescope, because there's also mission control centers that operate telescopes, like huge networks of radio telescopes. And yeah, any questions about this slide? radio telescopes can actually look through clouds. Since they're not trying to get visual data, they're trying to get radio waves. So that dish collects radio waves and records that data, and then you can work backwards from there about what those waves are reflecting off of and what those objects are. But please look it up online too. There's great things that explain it way better. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, yay space. That's astronaut Katie Coleman. She was in Harvard the other day, so I saw one of the talks that she did. She's really big on outreach, and so am I. And that's a really big part of my future, like right now here too. I've really benefited from being included in that way by people, on TV or here that included me in outreach to me. And I'm still a volunteer at Cambridge Public Schools, where I helped mentor those middle schoolers. And you know what they got to do was your gravity experiment before me. Yes, because you know what, they live down the street from MIT, so there's perks. There's perks. An astronaut came to the class and was like, hey kids, let's take that. So yeah, they got to go put their experiment on before I did. But I'm happy they did. I'm proud of them, and I encourage their scientific minds. There's also a Girl Scout Space Science badge that is new. So if you know a Girl Scout or a troop leader, volunteer and help that group of kids get their space science badge by helping them, learn about space and use a telescope and stuff. There's observing nights at universities that I like to be involved in. Boston has a lot of those. We don't have dark skies necessarily, but it's cool. And there's also national organizations you guys can be part of. So a few of them are listed like at this link and also at this one on space.com. But there's also something called the Planetary Society, and Bill Nye's the head of that. He does a lot of legal and lobbying to make sure NASA still gets funding and things like that, or funding commercial space flights. So there's things that anyone can be part of and keep up with, and that's a really great way to stay involved. I also have something called an amateur radio license that I got in CubeSat, and technically you can use it to talk to the ISS at some points, I think. I was told, so I got it. So I got to do that before the ISS deorbits.
What's your call sign?
I forgot, but I want to change it. It's like a bunch of random letters, like KW, whatever. But I want it to be Dora. Because I look like her, kind of. I used to have bangs and stuff. She's an explorer. Just like women explorer, the original. So yeah, I hope we have clear skies. You can always, if you don't want to ask your question here, you can totally message me on LinkedIn. Anything you want to talk to me about, I'm here. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great, Sarah. That was really